And I can't hold it much longer. Gonna let go so I can be free.
Hey, happy take a break day after the All-Star festivities. We're recovering and we are going right into some interesting second half situations. Also recapping some past time periods in the draft, which we had this past Sunday. I still say it needs to be placed somewhere else because it gets overshadowed. But anyway, good to see you both. And we'll be back in action with the live show on Thursday as well for the FT fam. Let's go in the weeds. In the Weeds is powered by Arena Club. More on Arena Club on the back half of the segment here. Use the code FOUL, 20% off your first purchase or slab pack. And we're going to show you some cards for the past decade of number one overall picks. So I'm going to start at 2015 and then take us through last year's first overall pick. So AJ, you're up first. We go back to 2015, and this is actually an interesting story. Dansby Swanson was the first overall pick. He was not selected by the Atlanta Braves or obviously the Chicago Cubs, the team he plays for now. He was selected by the Diamondbacks, and they shipped him away 6 months later.
They did, and I was there when that trade went down. Shelby Miller got traded for Dansby Swanson. And listen, I got to play with Dansby. He's had a great career. He's made a lot of money. He's won Gold Gloves. He's won a World Series. You could argue there might have been a better first pick, but he's a solid player. He's a solid big league player that brings leadership, great defense, and a solid bat. This was a good number one overall pick by the Diamondbacks. The bad part was when they traded him away for Shelby Miller, who's now back with the Diamondbacks 10 years later, but Shelby ended up getting hurt, missing a bunch of time. But Dansby Swanson here was a good number one overall pick.
I could not agree more. And the Diamondbacks should have held on to him. But we get to 2016, and you're like, okay, first overall pick was Mickey Moniak at the time. High school outfielder, highly hyped. Kratz. And for the Philadelphia Phillies, it was a big swing and a miss by, at the time, I believe, Matt Klentek, the GM of the Phillies back then.
He was trying to go here. Instead of trying to go get the best player, he was going to go get the most players he could get in his pool, and it didn't work out. It doesn't mean Mickey Moniak's not a big leaguer, and he hasn't had a good career, in the role that he plays, but 1-1, it's quite a few more. I know in the top five kind of has struggled a little bit. Senzel was in there. Ian Anderson was in there. He had a run with a World Series, but this is also the same pick that had Will Smith, a franchise-changing catcher in it. You sit there and you go, okay, we weren't going to take a catcher 1-1, but when you go cheap, sometimes 1-1, sometimes it doesn't always work out for you.
Yeah, I hate that move. Just take the best player on the board. You do not get the first overall pick very often. Don't get cute. 2017, yeah, the Twins went with Royce Lewis, AJ, and it's still TBD how that one will pan out because, he has had some really, really successful moments at the plate, but he cannot stay healthy. And then this year kind of turned into a disaster for him.
Yeah, he just hasn't been healthy. When he's healthy, or when he was healthy, until this year, he's raked, and he's been one of their best hitters. So, yeah, TBD, no, but who was picked behind him? Hunter Green, right? Who would you rather have, Hunter Green or Royce Lewis if you're the Twins? Let's be serious. So, yeah, it hasn't worked out for Royce. At the time, I could see the pick. I could see why. He was the best bat. And when he's healthy, or when he was healthy before this year, he has raked. So I could see why they made the move. The problem is he just can't stay healthy.
Yeah, I feel bad. He's a good kid. The Twins also were working him around to the outfield at one point. And that's when the injuries popped up for him, the really significant longer-term ones, right? He tore up, I don't remember his knee, Achilles, but whatever it was bad when he smashed into a wall and missed a lot of time. Let's get to 2018, Casey Mize for the Detroit Tigers, who was looked at as a massive bust of a pick. And then 2025 happened.
No doubt. You change things up and you get past a few things in your development. Not everybody develops at the same pace, but I think some organizations, that's why you go to an Auburn University. You go to the University of Florida and take your first round pick. You think they're a little bit more developed and you think they're going to impact the big leagues a little bit sooner. His impact's starting to be really felt. but you also had the same draft as like a Brady Singer who's very developed pitcher. Same draft though, notable. The Tigers did get Tarek Skubal, so I think it was in the 8th or 9th round. So you sit there and you go, they were looking for pitchers. They just found their superstar in a different round.
Yeah, they got the best player in the draft in the 9th round. If they were going for college starter, Logan Gilbert would have been the choice. He went number 14 overall to the Seattle Mariners. If you're looking for college starter who was first round projected, because Skubal wasn't and then ended up becoming a beast. 2019, Adley Rutschman for the Orioles. And here's another up and down story, AJ.
Yeah, but you could, at the time, he was the right pick. College catcher, switch hitter, power. This guy was undoubtedly the right pick at the time. Now, would you rather have Bobby Witt Jr., who was taken number 2? You can make that argument. But in the same draft, they drafted Gunnar Henderson. So were they going to take Witt and Gunnar at the same draft? I don't know. Adley was the right pick. Adley still has a time to become a great player. He's made all-star teams. We've seen all those things he can do when he's right. This was the right pick for the Orioles at the time and still has a chance to be an unbelievable pick down the road. And they got to re-sign him too. Let's not forget.
Yeah, but your point about Bobby Witt is also up there to consider. That ended up being by far the best player in that draft. But I get it. I mean, high school talent, there's definitely some risk there. But oof, I got to watch a few Bobby Witt prospect games when he was a high schooler, and I was like, he is way better than any of the college players that you're seeing that year. I mean, he was special even at that time. Ball sounded very different clicking off the bat. 2020, Spencer Torkelson, the first overall pick, and the Tigers had that one too. Kratz, he did have a 30 home run season a couple of years back, and then really has resurrected himself this year. Proud of him for putting it back together. Him and Mize are a big part of why this team's so damn good this year.
He is a prime example that if you work at something, even as a 1-1, you can get back to the big leagues and be a huge impact. I saw this guy in 2019 when we were qualifying for the Olympics, and we played at his school. I think it was Arizona State, and we played him, and they were like, this guy's going to be a first rounder. And then I started hearing during the game, maybe even 1-1, and I was like, whoa. So he comes up, and he's putting together big-time at-bats, driving breaking balls away, the opposite field. So you could tell he was skilled. Obviously, if you're going to go back to it, they probably should have gotten Garrett Crochet out of the University of Tennessee. But 2020 is, you always have hindsight 2020.
Yep. And in 2021, Henry Davis was the first overall pick out of Louisville, another catcher pick for the Pirates who tried to save some money to use it later on. And I believe that's when they got Bubba Chandler. So that's good for them, but they missed.
Well, they went cheap. They went what Kratz said about what the Phillies did with Mickey Moniak. They tried to save money so they could get better picks later on in the draft. Henry Davis, if you talk to most people, was a surprise as the 1-1 pick. The thing for me about Henry Davis' development is they tried to make him an outfielder. They didn't make him develop into a catcher. He's catching this year, but he also has Joey Bart there. So to me, this was more of a miss on development than it was on actually Henry Davis, because the Pirates, you don't take a catcher 1-1 unless he's a catcher. His value is as a catcher. Because if you're just looking for a bat, there was other guys in this draft that you could have taken for bat. So this was a miss by the Pirates in the fact of their development, not on Henry Davis.
2022, the Orioles went with Jackson Holliday, and that one looked obvious at the time, Kratz.
For sure. Even now, it's a little too early. You see his upside, but you also see the fact that it's okay if you struggle when you first get called up. Mike Trout struggled when he first got called up. How the organization helps him to continue to develop will be huge. And yeah, Neto's probably the most valuable player right now, but I don't think the Orioles ever really care about finished products. They just want to have, prospects coming through their system. To me, Jackson Holliday was a slam dunk. He's a great kid, and I think he's going to have a great career. I thought there was a point this season, had he continued to stay hot, could have been an all-star.
Mm-hmm. I'll do the last two here. 2023, Paul Skeens nailed it. Pirates learned from their mistakes from a few years back. Just spend it on the best overall player, and that's usually the best way to go. 2024, Travis Bazzana, not even cracking the bigs yet, but should be soon. So we'll see what happens for the Cleveland Guardians. Nice little look back at the past decade. of number 1 overall picks. This segment powered by Arena Club. Use code FOUL for 20% off your first slab pack or your card purchase. Slab pack, aka you get something real nice if you buy one of those packs and look for something and don't find it, then there's a buyback program with Arena Club as soon as the card pops up. FT fam, we will be right back to keep running through our day after All-Star break segment.
Scott, you have a Built Rewards card, right?
I do, Kratz. I pay a lot of money in rent, and now I get something for that. There's no cost to join, and just by paying rent, you unlock flexible points that can be transferred to your favorite hotels and airlines, a future rent payment, your next Lyft ride, and much more. When you pay rent through Built, you unlock 2 powerful benefits. First, you earn one of the industry's most valuable points on rent every month. No matter where you live or where your landlord is, your rent now works for you, and you gain access to exclusive neighborhood benefits in your city. Built's neighborhood benefits are things like extra points on dining out, complimentary post-workout shakes, and much more. Unique experiences that only Built members can access. And when you're ready to travel, Built points can be converted to your favorite miles and hotel points around the world, meaning your rent can literally take you places. So if you're not earning points on rent, my question is, what are you waiting for? Start paying rent through Built and take advantage of your neighborhood benefits by going to joinbuilt.com/foul. That's joinbilt.com/FOUL. Make sure to use our URL so that they know we sent you.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to a special episode of Foul Territory. I am your host, Alana Rizzo. I am pleased to be joined by Kyle Glazer, does a great job covering the San Diego Padres, among the other 29 teams, and Jack Somers, who does a tremendous job covering the Arizona Diamondbacks. We welcome you to the NL West Roundtable as we get set for the second half of the season. So let's start with you, Kyle. Great to be with you. Are the Dodgers, in your opinion, inevitable in terms of obviously making it to the postseason, but winning it again?
I don't know about winning it again, but winning this division and reaching the postseason, absolutely. The depth of talent the Dodgers have amassed goes beyond what any other team in baseball has. And I don't mean just the Major League roster, I mean the entire organization. Let's be clear, the Dodgers had 14 pitchers on the IL at one point this season, including most of their best starters, most of their best relievers. And despite that, they've had the best record in the division pretty much the whole year, and one of the best records in baseball pretty much the whole year. If the Padres or Giants had 14 pitchers on the IL, their records would look like the Rockies. It's incredible what the Dodgers have done and how they've been able to withstand this, and they do it every year.
Jack, let me ask you about the Arizona Diamondbacks. This is a team that obviously came into the 2025 season with high expectations, so much so that they spent more money this year on their payroll, on their roster, than they have any other year previous. They've been decimated more than anybody, I believe, with injuries. Are you pleased, I guess, with what they have, that they're even still in the mix?
I think that Torey Lovello gets a lot of credit here for keeping this team fighting and in it. Unfortunately, the truth is that despite losing Corbin Burns and AJ Puck and Justin Martinez, they were not playing great baseball even before all those injuries went down. They were kind of underperforming a little bit. But then the injuries just kept rolling and got into the second and third tier of players. And it's looking like it's becoming too much to overcome, unfortunately.
Kyle, when you look at the San Diego Padres and what they need to do moving forward in terms of the second half, what needs to change in order for them to be legitimate competitors in that NL West to get to the postseason?
There's 2 key developments that have to happen with the offense. Let's be clear, the Padres pitching has been excellent, top 10 in pretty much every category in Major League Baseball. They're a great defensive team. They've been running the base as well. The problem is an offense that has been bottom 5 in baseball in virtually every category since May 15th. First and foremost, they need to get their stars going. Fernando Tatis Jr. and Jackson Merrill have been mired in terrible slumps for the better part of 2 months. They need them to snap out of it. Manny Machado has been doing his job. Luis Arias has mostly been doing his job, but they need the best versions of Tatis and Merrill for this offense to really get going again. The other part of it is the bottom of this lineup is just non-competitive. You look at the bottom 2 spots on any given night, they're basically automatic outs. And if anyone else has an off night, you're looking at 3 or 4 automatic outs in the lineup. Realistically, the Padres need to go out and acquire at least 2 everyday hitters, and they need to improve their bench as well, getting another bat to help there. So it's going to be two-pronged. This is not something where this offense is one player away or one player who's slumping, snapping out of it away. They need a lot of things to happen for this offense to even just be an average offense in Major League Baseball. This has been a truly terrible and unwatchable offense for the better part of 2 months now.
Jack, I feel that regardless of where the Padres are in the standings, I feel like AJ Preller, they could be 20 games out and AJ Preller is going to be making moves. I think it's a little bit different for the Arizona Diamondbacks because they're in a bit of a precarious situation. They're not definitely going to make the postseason, but they're certainly not out of it. Are the Diamondbacks buyers or sellers? And what are their biggest needs in terms of the deadline?
What General Manager Mike Hazen has been talking about is how many teams they're behind and how far back are they. He's not really pegging it to a wins total. The question is are there enough games left before he has to make the decision? And it's starting to appear that there aren't. So in order for him to become an aggressive buyer, this team needs to get on a very hot run and give him the opportunity to add to the team. If he can add to the team, certainly the bullpen, he needs to pick up a couple of strong relievers to be able to sustain a run late into the season. They could probably use a left-handed DH as well. Pavin Smith got off to a hot start, then slumped for over 2 months, and now he's on the injured list with an oblique injury. So they really could use a good left-handed DH as well. But they've had, a top 3, 4, 5 offense the entire year. So offense isn't the biggest need. They need pitching, and specifically bullpen.
I think every team, all 30 teams, could say that bullpen is a need. And guys, the Los Angeles Dodgers are no different when it comes to that. Coming into the season, Andrew Friedman, the president of baseball operations, was very clear that he wanted to make the biggest moves in the offseason. So at this trade deadline period, he did not have to really look for much. Of course, when you have $102 million on the IL, Tyler Glasnow back, of course, Blake Snell on his way back, you're kind of thinking about what are the needs for the Dodgers moving forward. And I think to Jack's point, with the Arizona Diamondbacks, the Dodgers need bullpen help as well. You look at the fact that Blake Trinan, you're not certain when he's coming back. Evan Phillips is out. Obviously, Brusdar Graterol is not back yet. A couple of key pieces in that Dodgers bullpen are down. What does that mean for them? Do they go after a guy like Joe Kelly, who is chomping at the bit to come back for the Dodgers and certainly has pitched in big innings before for that team, as well as the Red Sox and the Cardinals as a starter? Do they go back and find somebody else to solidify what is a bullpen that's already very tired? Because the Los Angeles Dodgers and their starters have not gone deep into the game, and the bullpen is tired. So I think every single team, Kyle, needs that bullpen help. From your perspective, looking at what is the juggernaut in the NL West, for years in the past, obviously, for a decade, what are the Dodgers' biggest needs moving forward besides bullpen help?
I think you always look to the Dodgers to make a starting pitcher addition at the deadline. Even though they have all these great starters, we know that year in and year out, Andrew Friedman likes to fortify it for the stretch run. Last year, they went out and acquired Jack Flaherty. The year before, they went out and acquired Lance Lynn. Obviously, that one didn't work, but they still went out and got a notable pitcher. 2021, making the trade for Max Scherzer and Trey Turner. Just given the Dodgers' injury history with so many of their starters, we talk about Tyler Glasnow, we talk about Blake Snell, Roki Sasaki, obviously, we have no idea if he'll be back this year. Shohei Ohtani, you're ramping him up slowly. There's always going to be concerns about starting pitcher innings with this club. I would not be shocked at all if Andrew Friedman went out and acquired a starter at the deadline, because frankly, that's what they do pretty much every year, and there is a need for it this year, despite all the starting pitchers they signed.
Jack, what is it like from your perspective covering the Arizona Diamondbacks? Obviously, Jack Summers, the host of Snakes Territory here on the Foul Territory Network. Do the Diamondbacks still believe that they can compete with the Dodgers and the Padres, and to a certain extent, obviously, the Giants this season in the division with the way that the roster is right now and kind of the injuries that they're dealing with?
I don't think they believe that they have a shot at taking the division. They probably just don't have the horses. If they were speaking from their heart, of course, they're never going to openly or publicly state that until they're forced into a sell position. If we're looking at the trade deadline, the other point that we need to consider is that the Diamondbacks need controllable starting pitching going beyond 2025. So in their case, don't be surprised if they do kind of a buy sell two-step. I would not be shocked if they moved a player or two, and it would give the appearance that they've given up on the season, while at the same time moving a prospect or two to bring in some controllable pitching and then see where it goes from there. They still have a shot at the wild card. So I would say that the time is running out for them to be buyers at the deadline, but it's still far too early to count them out for a shot at the postseason.
I know we don't have a Giants representative on this NL West roundtable, but let's talk about those San Francisco Giants. I think a lot of people maybe wrote them off, or I'm not certain, what they thought they were going to do this year, but they're in the mix of things, right? They're making it very interesting in the National League West. Rafael Devers making splashes in terms of news in our industry when the Boston Red Sox elected to trade him to San Francisco. Some say it was a salary dump, some say it was to get that personality out of the clubhouse. Kyle, do you think that so far Rafi has made the impact that the Giants have hoped that he would?
Not yet. He's not hitting for a ton of average. He's not hitting for a ton of power. But we see that players, when they get traded, especially in season, it can take a little bit of time to get acclimated. Again, he's new league, entire opposite side of the country, new teammates, new clubhouse, new coaches. It takes some time, just as we saw in New York. It took Juan Soto 2 full months to get going. It wouldn't shock me if it takes Rafael Devers around the same time period. Eventually, you expect him to pick it up. And I think if you're the Giants, you're really just waiting for Rafael Devers to get comfortable, get acclimated, and also Willy Adames to start hitting. If those two players start doing what they can offensively, I actually think the Giants are the team that's going to finish second in the division. Both the Giants and Padres have been struggling to score. Both have been bottom 5 offenses and runs scored for the better part of 2 months now. But it's easier to see how the Giants get better. It's just, okay, 1 or 2 players really start picking it up. They're actually getting decent production from a couple guys in their lineup. Whereas on the Padres side, you have to have about 5 different things happen. And it's just going to be very, very difficult. So actually, I'm more bullish on the Giants and their chances down the stretch than I am the Padres, because I do think Rafael Devers and Willy Adames will click it into gear sooner rather than later.
Jack, the Diamondbacks will face the San Francisco Giants 6 times in the month of September. They've always had good starting pitching. The Giants have. That is certainly the case this year. This team seems to be more legitimate than many had thought. What is your perspective from the outside looking in at what the Giants need and what makes them good?
Well, the Giants look like a team that obviously could use a little bit more offense. I'm not sure what Buster Posey is going to do there. I'm sure that they have their eye on their schedule. So I would expect them to be very aggressive going forward. They're not done adding.
And with you, Kyle, what if you look at the San Francisco Giants as well? It's so funny to me still hearing what Jack was just saying. Let's see what Buster Posey is going to do. What? I still imagine Buster Posey behind the plate, not president of baseball operations for the Giants. Are they as good as they seem to be, Kyle?
The pitching is as good as it seems to be. You look at what Logan Webb's been able to do at the front of the rotation, what Robbie Ray's been able to do at the front of the rotation. These are 2 pitchers that are Cy Young Award contenders at their peaks. Robbie Ray has a Cy Young Award. Logan Webb was a Cy Young runner-up. The bullpen has been lights out. Randy Rodriguez is excellent, but they have so many arms they can throw at you that are just really, really high-quality arms. Eric Miller is a lefty with real stuff. Camilo Doval can bring it any given night. This pitching staff is absolutely legit, and their defense is pretty solid too. When you look at having Adames and Chapman on the left side of the infield, in some ways they and the Padres mirror each other. Great pitching staffs, great bullpens. These are probably the 2 teams in baseball that actually don't need bullpen help. I could probably trade from the bullpen to go get some bats, but it's just going to come down to the offense and the stars clicking into gear. The Giants and Padres have the exact same problems, and it's just going to be a matter of does it happen or does it not, and we'll see.
Jack, do the Arizona Diamondbacks make the postseason in 2025?
I do not believe they do. There's just too much to overcome. I think that, ironically, just as their pitching actually has been improved of late this month in July, their offense is regressing to the mean a little bit. Just too many injuries, too much depth has been taken away from them. I don't think they're going to make it.
Kyle, how do the Padres make the postseason in 2025?
Everyone has to start hitting and they need to bring in multiple bats. And realistically, I think it's hard to say right now with the way the Padres have been playing. Let's be clear. I talk about this 2-month stretch of the offense struggling. They're a below 500 team in that time. They got off to a 27-15 start, but since then, they've been an under 500 team. It's very, very hard to say right now that the Padres will make the postseason when you look at what so many other teams are doing, whether it's the Brewers, whether it's the Cardinals. Of course, the East with the Mets and the Phillies. One of them is going to take a wild card spot. There's about 5 different hitters that have to suddenly, after struggling all year, find it. And it's just hard to bet on that happening.
Jack, you brought up the point that the Dodgers and the Dodgers and the Giants rather see each other many more times this season. Who wins the division in your opinion, the Dodgers or the Giants?
The smart money has to be on the Dodgers, of course. But if you're looking for maybe a little bit of a long shot bet, I think the Giants are a possibility for somebody to make a little bit of coin there.
All right. If I'm a betting person, all right. We appreciate you guys very much. Kyle Glazer, host of Friar Territory, Jack Summers, host of Snakes Territory. Thanks for watching this NL West Roundtable, everybody. We look forward to watching how the second half unfolds. Subscribe to Snakes, Friar, and Dodgers Territory on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. Foul Territory. We'll be right back.
The way to buy, sell, or trade your cards is Arena Club. It is the top marketplace in the biz to get that done. And Kratz, we love the slab pack situation because rolling through a ton of cards, physically opening them, finding all kinds of commons that end up folded or in the garbage is old news. Why not get a slab pack and get a chance at a card worth thousands of dollars?
I was a common card. It's okay if you don't get me in your slab pack because you put as little as $25 for a slab pack and you could pull out something that's worth thousands of dollars. And it's a keepsake that you get to wait, you know what? It might be worth this much today, but I get to watch the value grow.
And right now you can get 20% off your first slab pack or card purchase by going to arenaclub.com/foul and use the code FOUL. That's 20% off your first card purchase or slab pack at arenaclub.com/foul. Code FOUL.
Welcome back to Foul Territory. I am Trevor May, host of Mayday, a live show that I do every Monday at 4 p.m. Eastern Time right here on the channel. And during that show, I do a segment called Maysplaining, where I get to go deep and dive into a subject that maybe has never been explained in the way that I do it. So, without further ado, let's just hop right into it. This is Maysplaining.
Rapsodo and Hawkeye all tell you this information. Paul Skeens has added 2 pitches to his arsenal going into 2025. No! Don't do it! Don't!
Buckle up. It's time for some Maysplaining.
It is All-Star Week down in Atlanta. All the best players in the major leagues met down there, got into some shenanigans, went head-to-head. We saw some great matchups. And we also saw that the draft happened this week as well. Quite the busy week if you are indeed an MLB executive or part of the executive team at all. A lot of pressure, a lot of things going on, and a lot of it is happening on the same day. Can't be fun. Must be exhausting. And most probably can't wait for this week to be over so they can take a little bit of rest. But unfortunately for them, the real pressure is put on starting Monday, and that is the trade deadline. The trade deadline this year is July 31st at 6 p.m. Eastern Time. It is the point at which no team can trade any players or receive any players to take them into the playoff race. And a lot of things in the system have changed over the years. But I was thinking, how? How did we get to where we are? And where did this whole thing start? So today, we are going to break down the history of the trade deadline so that we can appreciate this time in our lives just a little bit more in 2025. And I'm really excited. I love doing research because I am a big nerd. So let's talk about it. The year is 1923. Okay, can you picture it? Good. There was no trade deadline before 1923. Before then, it was just anyone could go anywhere, willy-nilly at any point in the season, and no one was really worried about one team having an advantage over another. I believe at this time there was only 8 teams. So the league is in its infancy. There was no need for a trade deadline until 1923, when a June 15th trade deadline was put in place, and it was intended to prevent late season buying of championships, which is what trade deadlines have had in spirit the entire time they've existed, and to encourage roster consistency for the stretch run. We don't want to have a different team winning that stretch, those games for the stretch, than they did to get them there, right? That makes a lot of sense to me, and this is setting the stage for a lot of the parity we look for in our game. The man in question, the pioneer of this new change to the rules, was none other than Kennesaw Mountain Landis. It's quite a mouthful. There's a lot of nicknames back there, and I got really excited to say it, so sometimes that happens. This gentleman, who may or may not ever smile. He was one of the most intense people I've ever seen and tried to find pictures. Honestly, it was very hard. Like, we have this one, and then we got this guy. But then we got a little bit of a smirk on this one from Kennesaw Mountain, but then he hit us with this guy. So let's just put it this way. Intimidation, one of the major tools in Kennesaw Mountain's toolbox as commissioner, because he was commissioner at the time. He actually oversaw the first official trade in 1929. His tenure was actually focused, and this is going to feel like a political campaign, but on restoring the integrity of post-Black Sox scandal, who we know earlier this year, the Black Sox scandal with Shoeless Joe Jackson is depicted in The Field of Dreams with, you know all about the story, and they were all reinstated back into baseball this year. And it was a big smear on the game, and a lot of people were turned off to the game after that happened because you couldn't know if anything was really happening the way it was, and Kennesaw sent out to clean that up, and by all accounts, it did the job. For 60 years, the trade deadline was set on June 15th and did not change until 1986. A lot of people at home might remember this picture, as the Mets did bring home the World Series that year. The major shift was moving the trade deadline up to July 31st to give more teams time to evaluate. So the season had also expanded a bunch of games since the last time as well. So giving them a little bit less, more time to think about what they want to do, and a little bit less time to have those players just made a bunch of sense. But a lot of the main tenets stayed the same. The pioneer of this change was Peter Ueberroth. Well, now that is what I am used to either presidents or commissioners looking like. At least we got a little smile here out of Peter. The way he changed it in 1986 was he introduced the waiver system, the August waiver system, how that works. And if you'll remember from our story on DFAs and how they work, one of the options was putting a player on waivers. What that effectively does, because waiver claims in baseball, fantasy baseball waiver claims and fantasy sports waiver claims are based on that system. So it's a list of players that are available, and then there is a picking order that teams have to go through in order to get their guy. So if you get the first pick in the waivers, you can go grab them and pay them, whatever their minimum salary is, and the other team is on the hook for the rest of their salary. That's how it works, or used to work until recently. So what they would do is someone would put a guy on the waiver claim, maybe the 10th team on the list, because the teams that early in the list don't make a lot of waiver claims usually. So they hoard them like they do in fantasy. And so teams could trade for that player. And then, so the first team takes them off waiver claims, and then they work out a trade. And so you had to do trades in that way involving a waiver in order to get them up to an August 31st deadline. So that was a big change in 1986, and August 31st every year became the de facto deadline for a player needing to play for the team. If they join the team after that, they cannot play in the playoffs, which stands to this day. Notable trades during this era were the Yankees in 2000 acquiring David Justice and later Glenn Allen Hill in August. In 2012, the Dodgers got Adrian Gonzalez, Carl Crawford, and Josh Beckett in an August blockbuster, all waiver claims. So you can't really do this anymore, and we will talk about that in a moment, but Bud Selig was one of the main guys working through these waiver claims. All three of these guys were waiver claim traded at some point. And Bud Selig, who's pictured here not being able to hear anything, surprise, was the mastermind behind that one. The waiver claims then ended in 2019 under a guy you're going to know. We ended this system in order to get rid of a system that's starting to be manipulated so teams could collude and big players were moving and the money wasn't the issue. It was the issue before. It became not an issue anymore, and they wanted to get rid of it because teams were manipulating it, and they wanted to increase transparency and competitive fairness. Okay. So, this is 2019. This was my favorite cartoon from the era, so I just want you to take that in for a second. But Rob Manfred was the guy who brought about the 2019 rule change that then got rid of the waiver claims. So now, today, we sit on a end of July, maybe first couple days of August, hard deadline for waiver for trades, which is what we are working with right now. But one new little thing that was put in and worked through with the PA and this gentleman, the head of the PA, Tony Clark, they got together and they started to, in the same spirit of the adding the waiver claim, added a little flexibility to what that date could be based on how the season plays out. This year, it just happens to be July 31st at 6 p.m. Eastern Time, and that is the deadline to have something in play. I believe there's a little bit wiggle room on the time of the day. If they get past a certain point, they're allowed to continue that negotiation. They can get an extension if they need to. So that brings us today, and that is what us as media members and all the fans are looking forward to, see what their team can get to make their team better. The next iteration of this is going to be a free agency deadline. We're going to hear a lot about that in the CBA, but that's for another day. So now teams are prioritized to buy or sell players a little bit earlier. So this next coming week, we might see some movement because that deadline is so set in stone and you have to make a decision, and teams would rather not get into a 14 betting war with prospects later. They would like to get the job done. So that's why we're seeing trades happen a little bit earlier in July, and that's why we could see some coming into this next week. So now we all know where the trade deadline came from. Hopefully that gives you a little bit more insight and lets you enjoy this time of the year a little bit more. Don't forget to check out Mayday, Mondays, 4 p.m. Eastern Time, right here on the Foul Territory channel. And we will see you then, more Foul Territory after this.
BetMGM segment of the day. There's no games today, so let's go through the top 10 starting pitchers since the year 2000. And this is a shout out to Clayton Kershaw racking up his 3,000th strikeout about a week ago. BetMGM's list that they put together has Clayton Kershaw 1, Max Scherzer 2. And remember, this is since 2000, so stats in the 90s don't count when we get deeper in here. Justin Verlander 3, Doc Halladay 4, but only the Doc from the 2000s. Zach Greinke 5, Jacob deGrom 6, Randy Johnson 7, Pedro Martinez 8, Johan Santana 9, and Garrett Cole 10. Top 10 starting pitchers since the year 2000.
Incredible.
How did they do?
I thought they did okay. I mean, I think I would have had Pedro up a little higher. I love watching Pedro. Even in the year 2000, I thought he was absolute filthy. I think Scherzer and Verlander together, you can make them, 2A, 2B. They were that good. DeGrom was, when he's healthy, there's nobody topping him. But yeah, I thought it was absolutely perfect mix there. Roy Halladay was absolutely unhittable. Just to name a few guys on there, I thought the list was pretty good.
Yeah, Pedro in 2000 had a 1.74 ERA. Baseball Reference WAR was about 12. He had 7 complete games, 4 shutouts, 217 innings. ERA plus was 291. And then still after that with Boston, 0-1, 2, 3, 4, all just exceptional seasons. I guess 0-4, I mean, it was technically closer to a 4 ERA, so not as exceptional as the other ones, but a lot of low 2s ERAs in here. And then it, kind of fell off, not as Pedro-like after that. But that's the thing, Kratz, is if you look at the whole, if you go back to his whole career, yeah, of course, you're going to shoot Pedro, Randy, guys like that higher up on the list, but you're only taking a portion of the career when you chop it off from 2000.
Yeah, I mean, that's tough. That's tough having them in front of Cole just because of what they did in the 2000s. If you're really being specific about the 2000s, to me, Garrett Cole, I don't care where you put him on this list, Garrett Cole has to be above DeGrom. Has to be above DeGrom. Am I saying that DeGrom's not more nasty when he's out there at his peak? Yes, he is. He's he's a guy that people are going to be talking about a dominant 7-year stretch where he didn't pitch entire seasons. So it's going to be tough to talk about. I love seeing my ex-teammate Doc up there, Roy Halladay, Hall of Famer. The only actual Hall of Famer that he was elected early before because he was posthumous. So it was one of those things that, as an ex-teammate, you watch a guy and you watch how they work. I feel like his numbers in the game were not as good as how hard he worked. And a lot of people say, "Ooh, this guy was a hard worker." Nobody beat Doc. Doc worked harder to get out of his body what he got out of it. I mean, it was awesome to see. But Clayton Kershaw's, to me, they should have he should be 1 and 2 in my opinion. Max Scherzer, great career. But if you look up to see what Clayton Kershaw did throughout his entire career, he should be 1 and 2, and then you go to Scherzer.
Wow. Okay, so let's finish with this. Because these two guys both were 2000s pitchers, so I think it's the easiest way to do the comp. They have Scherzer 2, Verlander 3. Did they get that right, or would you flip it?
Oh, God, it's so hard.
Right?
I probably would do Verlander ahead of Scherzer.
JB 2,
Yeah.
Scherzer 3. What about you, Kratz?
I would say Scherzer 2, Verlander 3. I mean, we're talking about a hair of a difference. And the only thing I would say is Scherzer's downtime was at the beginning of his career. Verlander went through that 13 to 15 stretch where his shoulder was kind of eh. And so from there, I would say Scherzer over Verlander.
Right, that's true. Yeah, he had the blip in the middle of his career and then resurrected and was amazing again, talking about JV. Really cool. Well, anyway, a good list put together by BetMGM, top 10 starting pitchers since 2000. If you're watching right now and have some thoughts, then let her rip, baby. Let us know. And if you're in the BetMGM app, swing for a shot to win, a little boost token, or some bonuses. If you play the Swing for the Fences game inside the app, it's free to play the game. It's every day. And to access the game, you score a bigger prize if you get yourself a single, double, triple, or a home run. If you're out, it's all good. Play the next day. Gambling problem or concern? Call 1-800-GAMBLER.
Welcome back to Foul Territory. I'm Chandler Rome of Crush City Territory, joined by Cody Stavenhagen of The Athletic and Tiger Territory, and Max Goodman of NJ.com covering the Yankees. Guys, we're going to talk a little bit about the American League and a first half that I don't think played out as many people expected it. Cody, you cover the best team in baseball, which I don't think is something you expected coming into the year. I don't think it's something I expected to say coming into the year. In the American League Central, though, the Tigers have obviously run out to a massive lead. What has been the biggest storyline maybe in that division aside from the Tigers that's allowed the Tigers to really gain so much ground and really run away with this division?
I think it was hard entering this season to pick a clear favorite in the AL Central. I heard people pick the Tigers. I heard people pick the Royals, the Twins, the Guardians. Everyone but the White Sox was kind of supposed to be in this. Now, we're here more than halfway through the season, and the Tigers are the only team with above a 500 record. They've obviously had a million things go right. They've played really good baseball. They've also gotten some unlikely comeback stories. Javier Baez, Spencer Torkelson. But the Guardians have been a disappointment. The Twins have been really up and down. The Royals have not taken off based on the foundation they built last year. It's maybe hard to boil that down to one storyline, but some of these teams that were supposed to be good, not great, have been more mediocre. And meanwhile, the Tigers have soared to, like you said, the best record in all of baseball. Certainly unexpected, but they've played really good, really consistently for more than half a season now.
Max, the AL East, always rife for storylines. There's never a shortage of. It's never boring in that division. The Yankees they began the season, really got out to a nice little lead, and then the Blue Jays have come on very strong toward the end of this first half. What have you sized up about the AL East, maybe from top to bottom, that has the Yankees right now in a position to get a wild card spot, but certainly not in a position to win that division?
Well, if we were having this conversation a month ago, maybe a month and a half ago, I would have said that the Yankees were cruising to a division title. Maybe it was a little too early to say cruising, but they were positioned to really run away with this thing. And credit to Toronto. I think a lot of people underestimated them for this year. I mean, I quite frankly haven't thought about their core as a unit that was going to be able to get it done after all those years where they've disappointed in the AL East. Tampa's always around. I think Boston's had a disappointing year with all they've been going through, and the Devers situation is a big part of that. I guess they could still be in striking distance, but they've got certainly a lot of work to do. And the Orioles are one of the biggest stories and disappointments in baseball. With they're in the cellar, they're going to be sellers at the deadline probably, and they've got such an impressive young core that this is a wasted year for them. But the Yankees it's been a high and low type of season for them, right? I mean, they've got Aaron Judge, they've got Max Fried. A lot of guys have been stepping up on that team, but they definitely have holes. And we've seen with their basically annual summer swoon that they go through that this is not a perfect roster. So they've definitely got some work to do before the trade deadline.
Watching the Yankees play the Mariners, you are getting an up-close look at everything the American League West has to offer, with the Seattle Mariners, who went into Yankee Stadium and got swept. The final sweep clinching game, they carried a no-hitter into the eighth inning and still somehow lost a 5-run lead with their closer on the mound. And it's just par for the course for an American League West that is, again, chasing the Houston Astros. An Astros really kind of a skeleton crew. Yordan Alvarez has only played 29 games in the first half. Jeremy Pena has a broken rib. They have 5 starters on the injured list, including 3 members of their season opening starting rotation. 2 of them are out for the year. This is a team that has dealt with injuries all season. They have dealt with underperformance from Christian Walker, their premier addition at first base. They have dealt with underperformance from catcher Yainer Diaz, but again, find themselves where everyone presumes they'll be. That's atop the AL West. Part of that is the Texas Rangers have severely underperformed. They have the league's lowest ERA, but somehow can't hit, to the point where they got Brett Boone to come be their hitting coach in mid-May to try to turn things around. The Angels have been a surprise, but certainly I don't think a team that anyone fancies a contender. The A's are miserable in a AAA ballpark. So it leaves the Astros and the Mariners jockeying for the division lead, and the Astros have kind of shown that they're inevitable. And until someone dethrones them, I don't think I'm going to pick against the Astros to win the AL West. They're doing this with like I said, a skeleton crew of people, but they have found a way to tap into the little organizational depth they have to compensate for some of these injuries, for some of these underperformance. As we look going forward, guys, what do you think is the biggest threat maybe to your team's pursuit of a playoff spot, your team's pursuit of a division title? I just said the Astros, it's going to be injuries. They've got to get Jeremy Pena back. They've got to get Yordan Alvarez back from his broken hand. They've got about 4 or 5 guys rehabbing at their pitchers rehabbing in West Palm Beach at their spring training facility. They need at least 2 or 3 of them to come back and give a boost to this pitching staff. Max, as you look at the Yankees, what is maybe their biggest threat trying to get a AL playoff spot or win the American League East?
I mentioned that they have a lot of work to do. I think it comes down to the injuries and the holes with this roster. And Yankees GM Brian Cashman spoke recently about the trade deadline, and even he admitted that he's got quite a hefty shopping list that he's going to have to try to take care of here. And they're going to go to town this this month of July and try to upgrade this roster. But there are no guarantees that you're going to be able to bring in a third baseman, which was a weakness even going into this season. Finally, they cut ties with DJ LeMahieu, but a mix of Oswald Peraza and Yorbit Vivas is not going to cut it at third, especially not offensively. Starting pitching, Garrett Cole hasn't thrown a pitch all year, and he won't. He had Tommy John surgery. Clark Schmidt recently went down with the same procedure, and Luis Heel might not be back for another month, if not at the very least in early August. So they need a starter who's going to pitch game 3 of a playoff series behind Fried and Rodon, and then the bullpen too. Man, it's been a rough go for that bullpen over the last several weeks. Devin Williams has distinguished himself as the true closer for them, and Luke Weaver is still that setup guy, but you're missing Mark Leiter Jr., Fernando Cruz. They're both hurt. Jonathan Loaizaga has not looked like the old version of himself this year, so they got to go out and get reinforcements, not only to have more high leverage options, but to get to October, because you don't want your best late inning guys to burn out too early.
Cody, biggest threat maybe internally or externally to the Tigers and their, as we just have talked about, their best record in baseball. What's maybe their biggest threat the next couple months of the season?
Yeah, at least in regards to the AL Central, I'm not sure they have to worry much about an external threat. Last year, the Tigers overcame near insurmountable odds. They had 0.2% playoff chances in August. That's nearly inverse now. They have enough to weather anything that might go wrong in the second half. But if we think bigger, if we think the American League at large, how can the Tigers maintain the best record in baseball and win the AL? I think you really have to look at their pitching. We've seen some cracks in that framework. In June, the Tigers' bullpen ERA ranked 26th. Will Vest and Tommy Kahnle have been very good at the back end. Chase Lee has been an interesting story, but otherwise, there are not a lot of dependable options in the bullpen. Scott Harris and the Tigers are going to be tested on how aggressive they will be at the trade deadline. I think they're going to have to get at least one leverage reliever, maybe two, add some swing and miss to this bullpen. And then even in the rotation, the Tigers have, of course, Tarek Skubal. Casey Mize is having a nice year. Reese Wilson just got back from injury. Jack Flaherty hasn't been very reliable. They don't have a stable fifth starter. There's a case they should add starting pitching too, and that's another thing. The Tigers ride so heavily on Tarek Skubal. What if something goes wrong there? What if he gets takes a comebacker off the foot and has to miss some time? I mean, I think there's a case to both bolstering the rotation. They're going to lean on some internal improvements, guys like Tyler Holton, who have been very good in the past and maybe not quite as good so far this season. But they're going to have to shore up the pitching a little bit to fully get the job done, I think.
Cody, I'm insanely jealous you get to watch Tarek Skubal pitch every fifth day. Max, I'm insanely jealous you get to watch Aaron Judge take at bats every day. You two guys cover you cover the best pitcher in baseball. Cody, Max, you cover the best position player in baseball. So the answer to this next question can be pretty obvious for you guys, but I want you to think outside the box a little bit. Why are the Yankees best positioned to exceed in October, Max? And Aaron Judge can't be your answer.
Can I say the offense as a whole?
Sure.
Okay. I'll say the offense as a whole. I think you mentioned the Brian Wu game, and I think that's a perfect example here, that this offense is really never out of a ball game, and they can put up crooked numbers like the best of them. And that summer swoon that they've seemingly emerged from was a sign of the fact that it's an imperfect offense in the sense that they do struggle at times with situational hitting. But when they're firing on all cylinders, when Giancarlo Stanton is leaving the ballpark, when you're getting more production from those youngsters who have stepped up this year, Ben Rice, Jason Dominguez, when the veterans, Cody Bellinger has looked great this year, the whole Plan B experience trying to figure out who's going to step up after losing out on Juan Soto in free agency, Paul Goldschmidt's had a pretty solid season too. A lot of the guys that they've brought in have performed and in many cases exceeded expectations. So the left side of the infield, it's been a disappointing year for Anthony Volpe. And again, third base is still a black hole on offense for the Yankees. If they can bring in a slugger to play third and shore up that spot, then this offense really has the ability to beat any pitching staff out there. Granted, you face Detroit in the playoff series and you've got Skubal for 2 or 3 games, then it gets a little tougher and you wonder if it's enough. But the upside of this Yankees offense can take them all the way through October.
Cody, you can't take Tarek Skubal out of the equation. He's obviously going to be a big reason the Tigers excel in October if they do. But maybe outside of Skubal, what is the Tigers' best attribute that will allow them to excel in October?
Yeah, in like a 5-game ALDS, having Skubal, pretty good built-in advantage. But if you're looking to win a 7-game series, that's more where the Tigers are geared this year. I think that's where it's worth considering the fact they're really well-rounded. This is not a perfect team. I just talked about some of the weaknesses in the pitching staff. It's not a lineup full of stars and guys we think of as traditional sluggers, but they've had success. They've had a good offense, but they do a lot of little things well. They go first to third at the highest rate in baseball. They get the platoon advantage nearly as often as anyone in baseball. They have a manager in A.J. Hinch who has both won in the postseason before and is regarded as one of the best tacticians in the sport. I think you look around and it's hard to make a case there's another team as well-rounded as the Tigers. The Astros are always a looming threat, but the Tigers beat the Astros in the playoffs last year. This is a better Tigers team. At least on paper, I'm not sure it's a better Astros team. The Yankees, man, there's some star power there. There's some slug there, but we've already seen midseason like how quickly things can go wrong in the Bronx. The Mariners are an interesting team. The Jays are an interesting team. I think there's still a lot that could change in the second half in the American League, but I think the Tigers' well-roundedness, the way they do the little things, is going to serve them well and give them a chance to compete with anybody.
Yeah, on paper, Cody, this is a worse Astros team than the one that lost to the Tigers in the wild card series last year, but somehow they have a better record, and somehow they have soared to 17 games above 500. How that happened is what will allow the Astros to succeed in October. They have two of the best starting pitchers in baseball, and Hunter Brown and Framber Valdez in a 7-game series. If you can get 4 starts out of them, that's an advantage that not a lot of teams will have. They have two of the best relievers in baseball in setup man Brian Abreu, closer Josh Hader, who is pitching like every bit of the $95 million closer the Astros believe they were getting last season. So when you can shorten a game in the postseason with those 4 arms, you have a pretty good advantage in October. But I think the Astros' biggest advantage in October is twofold. One, it's Jose Altuve, who is just a steady heartbeat, a guy that will enter this October second all time in postseason home runs behind Manny Ramirez. He is the engine that makes this thing go, even if he is not maybe the most vocal rah-rah guy. He's going to be the guy in the playoffs that really this entire team turns to. And, that segues into what the next thing that makes the Astros so dangerous in October. It's just their aura. It's their inevitability. You kind of I think other teams, the Tigers may have dispelled this theory last year, but when a team runs up against the Astros in the postseason, it just seems like no matter who is wearing in the Astros uniform, someone is able to come through. Someone always steps up on the biggest stage. It is a playoff experience team that there's few other teams in the AL that can claim to have that much October experience. And I think that's going to be maybe what tips the scales in the Astros' favor as this October comes and looms. And, it's a difficult AL playoff picture to maybe diagnose at the moment, but this is an Astros team with enough experience and enough just inevitability about them to make you think they have a deep run in them. Thanks for watching this AL Contenders Roundtable. Be sure to check out Max's work at NJ.com and subscribe to Tiger and Crush City Territory. More Foul Territory after this.
There is an FT shop. There are significant updates. So we want to just keep letting the people know. Baseball, the way it should be covered, is on a t-shirt. And I better see quite a few orders on that lightweight hoodie, because you know who you are. There are many people that sent us notes saying they want lightweight hoodies. So we got those cooked up special for you.
Welcome back, everybody, to Foul Territory alongside the great Ken Rosenthal. I am Alana Rizzo. Ken, everyone's talking about it. What should we be watching for as the trade deadline looms?
Separation, Alana. And what I mean by that is teams that will maybe fall out of contention, teams that will start to see themselves more as contenders, teams that are on the bubble. Those teams need to decide which way they're going. Now, we know full well that the buy-sell equation is not necessarily binary. Some teams will do both, and it is simplistic to divide teams into that category or those categories. But we do know also that there are teams that just are not quite sure where they are. Teams that are maybe 3.5, 4 back in the wild card race. Teams that might be in that kind of position, 3.5, 4 back, but think we don't really have a chance to win the World Series. So that's what we're looking for over the next couple of weeks. Teams to define themselves, figure out exactly who they are.
Ken, the AL wildcard picture seems to be very muddled. What do you think happens with that? How do you believe that plays out?
I'm not exactly sure, Alana, and a lot will depend on the deadline, on which teams make moves. Now, the Central has a number of teams, the Royals, the Guardians, the Twins, those three in particular, that can go either way, that seemingly have a chance of a wild card, but you're really not sure kind of where they stand. In the East, I fully expect Boston to try to go for it. Toronto and the Yankees, of course, are in that position already. And in the West, the Mariners are a team that still want to do some things, still want to win. So it's a muddled picture. It's kind of what we're getting at here. And I don't know that I expect it to change. I have not mentioned the Texas Rangers there, but they could be 2 hot weeks away from being a team that is a buyer as well.
So much can change over the course of the next 2 weeks, Ken. The Orioles, though, are they a classic should? What does that mean?
They are a classic should sell. Should sell. That's what the should means there, Alana. And yes, they already have made the one move before the deadline, the Brian Baker trade to the Tampa Bay Rays, a good one because it netted them the 37th pick in the draft. And you see the list of trade candidates. These are just players on expiring contracts, except for Baker, who has 3 years of club control remaining. Ryan O'Hearn is an all-star. Ramon Laureano has had a really good run for them. Cedric Mullins, center fielder, and then some right-handed pitching starters. Charlie Morton and Tomoyuki Sagano, as well as Andrew Kittredge and Sir Anthony Dominguez. And then on the injured list of those, Eflin is the one who likely is coming back. So yes, they're going to do some things. They, with the trade of Baker, identified themselves as sellers. We've all been waiting for that. We know they're a disappointment. They want controllable starting pitching. Not sure they can get it before the deadline. Teams that have it don't want to trade it. But the Orioles, I expect, will be active, yes. Somewhat like the Tampa Bay Rays were last year when they had that massive sell-off, traded 9 players.
Not to say that it's easy to get into the postseason, Kenny, but it seems like it's an easier pathway in the American League. The National League seems a much more tough race in terms of getting to that postseason with the amount of teams. Let's talk about NL home field advantage. Who separates themselves?
Well, you're talking about the elite teams, Alana, right? And that would be the Phillies, the Mets, the Dodgers, the Cubs, and maybe even the Brewers in that mix. The Dodgers are a team that designed their roster with the intent of not overpaying at the deadline, and I don't expect them to be terribly active. What they have generally looked to do under Andrew Friedman, and this is Friedman's philosophy going back to his days with Tampa Bay, is look for impact moves. So if they can get an impact reliever or an impact bat that would be maybe better than what Michael Conforto has given them, yeah, I can see them doing that, but I don't know that they're going to do big things. The Phillies, on the other hand, have significant needs. Need for an outfielder and, more importantly, need for bullpen help. Yes, Jose Alvarado is coming back, but he'll only be available for the regular season. And yes, they can move a starter to the bullpen for the postseason the way they have in the past. But I don't see them necessarily just sitting and standing there saying that's good enough. They can't do that. They know they need bullpen help, and they're going to go out and get it.
All right, Ken. So that's what the 5 contenders in the National League are looking to add. What about the American League? You know the Yankees are going to be in the mix. Toronto's looking good. Obviously, Detroit has kind of led wire to wire so far this season. What are each of those teams missing? What do they need to complement what's already a good roster?
First off, Alana, I expect each of those teams to be aggressive. The Yankees' needs are clear. Third base, big need. Starting pitcher, big need. 2 bullpen arms, that would be a need as well. The Blue Jays, I expect to be aggressive as well. They don't need much help on the offensive side. Obviously, if they can find impact, they would do that. But on the pitching side, they have some short and long-term concerns. Max Scherzer and Chris Bassett are free agents at the end of the year, so a controllable starter for them would be outstanding. Gausman and Barrios only have 1 more year after this one. And then in the bullpen, I expect Jeff Hoffman to be better in the second half, but at the same time, a high leverage reliever would be certainly something that the Jays would want to add, as well as every other team in the mix. Could they go get a left fielder, someone in the outfield as well? Yes, they could, but I expect them to be pitching heavy. And then finally, the Tigers, another team that will be pitching heavy. They seem to have settled on their right-handed hitting needs. They're okay there, but another starter for sure. And swing and miss relief pitching is something that they've been looking for quite some time. They've got a good pen, but they'd love to get a guy in there who can just strike out people and do it that way.
Ken, I love the fact that so many extra teams get into the postseason because it's good for the fan base and it keeps people interested a lot longer, but it also muddles the situation in terms of who's going to buy and who's going to sell. In your time covering this game, how do you think the wild card picture and the expansion of the wild card teams has changed the deadline?
Exactly what you just said, Alana. It's muddled the picture and it's forced teams to hold on longer because they don't want to give up on a season necessarily and signal to their fans that, you know what, even though we're 4 games out of a wild card, we don't feel we can do it. And teams that have done that in recent years have gotten heavily criticized, and it's just not a healthy way to go about it. Teams should be competing. That's the whole point of the sport. Compete and get to the playoffs. So while it's muddled the picture, it's also made it more interesting in certain respects because at times we will see what they call baseball trades. And what GMs and baseball people mean by that, what they mean by the term baseball trades is major league need for major league need. And rather than a prospect trade in which you're trading a veteran for prospects, you're addressing something on the major league roster both ways. So it's going to be an interesting deadline. A lot of people expect it to be a dud. I don't know that it will be. Yes, Rafael Devers probably was the best player who will be traded, but there is always action, Alana, and I am quite sure there's going to be action this time.
Yeah, it's always fun to watch. And I know it's a busy time of the year for you, but from a fan perspective, it's great. It's like, who's going where? What's going to happen? Ken, we appreciate your insight as always. And everybody, don't forget, you can catch a brand new Fair Territory with Ken Rosenthal every Monday at 10 a.m. Eastern and also on Thursdays at 12:30 p.m. Eastern all season long. Subscribe to the entire Foul Territory network. More Foul Territory right after this.
Welcome back to Foul Territory. My name is Brad Rowland. I'm one of the hosts of the Hammer Territory podcast covering the Atlanta Braves all year round. And I'm joined on this NL East roundtable by a couple of friends. We have Jim Salisbury from the Philly Show and James Shiano from Mets Up. Guys, welcome. How we doing?
Doing great. Thanks, Brad. Good to be with you.
Doing great. Really excited to talk about a very interesting division, National League East.
It has been interesting. The team that I cover the most, the Atlanta Braves, is interesting for a not so good reason. We'll probably come back to that at some point.
Debatable.
But or, unless you're a Mets or Phillies fan, of course. But what would you say is the kind of biggest first half storyline in the division? It could be a team that could be the team you cover, could be another team. But what do you guys think is the kind of lead storyline of the first quote unquote half of the season in the division?
Can I say the Braves are in 4th place? I think that's pretty significant. But yeah, I'm not sure if I can pick a biggest storyline. One of my big interests coming into this season was, could the New York Mets recapture that great chemistry they had for the final really 4 months of the regular season last year and into the postseason? I think they've done a pretty good job at it. So really kind of shaping up as a 2-team race with them and the Phillies. Mets have had some injury problems in their rotation, but I think they're going to make it interesting as their guys get healthy. But honestly, for me, probably the biggest storyline is the fact that the Braves are not going to be at this party in the second half.
Yeah, sadly, I do agree with Jim. I think the biggest story is the fact that the Braves have fallen off to the degree that they have. Basically, the only team in baseball they can beat is the Mets, which is, much to my chagrin. But the fact that we're going through this race and something that was really meant to be a 3-team race, something that it would have delivered well as a 3-team race, because the Mets and the Phillies are, while they both had amazing seasons, they both have hot streaks and cold streaks, and they have both shown some flaws despite being some of the better teams in the National League. Like, it would be the perfect trio with the Braves as a 3-team race, but they've just, between the injuries and the inconsistency and the poor play from some stars. Brad, I remember when I came on your guys' show as for a Mets preview at the beginning of the season, you guys asked me, like, what has to happen for the Mets to win this division? And I was like, I'm going to tell you 10 things that have to go wrong for the Braves, and we need about 7 of them to come through. And somehow, maybe 8 or 9 of them have actually come through, with the exception of Ronald Acuna Jr. returning and being a superstar. But that to me is the story, along with something I'm sure we're not going to talk about much past this, so I want to give it some mention. the Marlins going on becoming something like an okay, decent team over the last 2 months, I think is something that needs more recognition because they're likely going to sell again at the deadline. They're likely not going to compete for a wild card spot. But this was a team that many thought in April and May was destined to have one of the worst records in Major League history. And they've gotten themselves within a stone's throw of 500, which is amazing. And the fall off of the Nationals that has now coincided with the firing of Davey Martinez and general manager Mike Rizzo in the last couple of weeks. So I think that those are interesting storylines, but they are far behind the race of the Mets and Phillies and the complete dissolution of the Braves.
I certainly agree. I was going to mention the Marlins if you did, just to give them a little bit of a shout out for playing better baseball. And they're right there with the Braves, which is not where anybody would, even the biggest Braves hater would not have had the Marlins even or ahead of them at the All-Star break. And I think that the answer is the Braves. But look, I'm actually intrigued to watch the Phillies Mets battle for the rest of the season at the top of the division. Intrigued is not not excited. I'm using intrigued in a less excited or positive sense, but I am interested in it to see which team kind of, crowds out the other and wins the division. And obviously, good setup for wild card stuff as well. I want to look ahead of the second half a little bit and say, that's kind of I think that's probably the headline topic looking forward is the Mets versus Phillies battle. I'm sure you guys both have big time thoughts as to what's going to be happening in this race. I will leave it up to you to see who has the first salvo in this back and forth between the Phillies and the Mets.
Go ahead, James. Let me hear you.
One thing that I'm a little disappointed in between what's going to be a great second half between the Mets and the Phillies is the way that we've now changed the Major League schedule over the last few years. So the Mets and Phillies haven't seen each other for a while now, and then we're not going to play again until Monday, August 25th, and then we'll play the Phillies 7 times in about a 3-week stretch as the series closes. This would be a great summer to have the old school schedule. We have 5 series against the Phillies to figure out this division, mano a mano. But the Phillies are just sadly who we thought they were is probably right now still the best or one of the top 3 rotations in all of baseball with 4 guys who are just clicking. I know Jesus Luzardo has his blow-ups every here and there, but still on the start in, start out basis, he's someone to fear. Zach Wheeler is the best pitcher in the National League right now. At least he's pitching like the best pitcher in the National League. Aaron Nola will come back. I'll never believe that Aaron Nola is the guy we saw in the first half. I think we'll see a rebound in Aaron Nola. And Christopher Sanchez and Ranger Suarez, just, man, in terms of lefties in the National Leagues, like who has better guys than that? With Luzardo on top, like that's a 5-man rotation that is terrifying to me as a Mets fan, and one that I'm not excited to have to catch games against as we go through the second half.
It is a fantastic rotation, one that we often draw parallels with the 2011 rotation, which was also a great one with Halladay, Lee, Cole Hamels, Roy Oswalt. And that rotation, the Phillies rotation, has lived up. The preseason copy on this team was great rotation, and they've really been a great rotation. Luzardo's been a nice pickup. He had a couple pretty serious blips, but he's overcome them. And that rotation is so deep and so effective. I think it's going to help them down the road solve some issues in their bullpen. Inconsistent offense. They have some wild highs on the offense, and they have some very low lows on the offensive side. So that and the bullpen, I think, are this team's 2 biggest weaknesses. Dave Dombrowski is going to address that bullpen. They're going to get a shutdown arm at the trade deadline. They have to. They can't risk going forward with this bullpen the way it is. And then I think they'll get somebody out of that rotation that'll go down there and help. I agree with you. Aaron Nola, I don't count him out. I think he's going to come back and have a nice stretch drive. And Zach Wheeler, for Mets fans, that's got to really sting watching him, leave the Mets and just have this kind of mid-career ascension, not just to be very good, but to be among the 1 or 2 very, elite pitchers in this game. He's a really great one, a fun one to watch. And that the Phillies rotation, I expect them fully to play in October. I expect that rotation to give them an advantage on most nights, but they have to avoid, the nights where they have tons of swing and miss, tons of strikeouts, left on base, those 1 for 10 with scoring runners in scoring position nights. And they need to fix the bullpen. If they do that, I think they're a legit World Series contender.
It's actually a good opportunity to look at a tried and true topic during the All-Star break, and that is the deadline, which Jim just brought up. What teams are going to be trying to do. I know covering the Braves, it's different than I thought it was going to be. They're talking about maybe even selling a little bit in a way that was not anticipated. There's been pushback locally, I would say on the record and off the record, that they're not going to sell guys with future contracts, but they're weighing this balance now where it's like, hey, if you're really going to be out of it, you might want to consider a more big picture overall change. But it's mostly, do you sell or do you kind of hold steady? I wonder what you guys think about. Obviously, would be in buying mode if you're the Phillies and the Mets. But we can go back to Jim. Like, is it as simple as the bullpen as the priority? Like, what does the priority list look like for the Phillies ahead of the deadline?
Priorities: bullpen, big arm, shutdown arm, leverage arm, maybe with some experience, maybe even with a little control in future seasons, because I think they're willing to give up. They have, a handful of really nice prospects at the high end, top end of their minor league system. And they're willing to bite down and give up somebody to get the right reliever here. You look at this nucleus. You only got Zach Wheeler's going to retire in 2 years. He's 35 years old. Bryce Harper's over 30. Trey Turner's over 30. Castellanos, Schwarber, Real Muto, all over 30. The odometer on this team is high. They're not going to be together forever. It's sort of like win now, win next year. Times are getting, the clock is running on this team. So they are prepared to give up a prospect, maybe two, for the piece they think will put them over the top. So I think it's going to be a busy trade deadline for the Phillies, prioritizing a leverage arm or a shutdown arm at the back of the bullpen. If they can get two of them, they'd love to get two of them. I'm talking, one upper tier, maybe one mid-tier guy back there. And they would love to bring in a right-handed bat to help out in the outfield. But, you look at the guys that are out there and nothing really jumps out at you. I think there's guys out there that could mitigate some of their problems, maybe in left field, maybe as a platoon guy on the right-handed side. But first and foremost, it's bullpen.
I think the Mets have a similar approach to the Phillies, but even more so, where we need kind of one of everything. The Mets could use at least one or two relievers. They could probably use one mid-level rotation starter, even with the returns of Kodai Senga and Sean Manaea. You just never know what the second half will hold in terms of health for those guys and the rest of a rotation. Even with those guys, the Mets only have a 5-man rotation. In the past, with Kodai Senga, they've shown to prefer a 6-man rotation most of the time. And then the Mets lineup, as talented as the top half is, it's been inconsistent for most of the season, especially with runners in scoring position, which is something that we hope does level out over time based on the talent we know we have and the process stats. We know the Mets are doing well, but there probably does need to be some kind of right-handed bat that steadies this bench in the bottom of the order in lieu of the guys who are there trying to do it, like Starling Marte. Mark Vientos has had a very, very poor season trying to follow up his heroics of last year. The Mets probably do need to take a bit more of an all-fields approach to this trade deadline and find a little bit of everything. But I still do think, similar to the Phillies, the number one need for this team is bullpen help. It's not exactly the shutdown guy like the Phillies need with us having Edwin Diaz in the backside. But before Edwin Diaz, there's Reed Garrett, who is, I think, a very high-level reliever, but then still has his moments of inconsistency. There needs to be one or two guys thrown into that mix to make this team have the kind of upside that we felt like they had last year, getting 2 games away from the World Series.
If I could, do you think the Braves would move any relievers? I'm not saying they would move them within the division. That could be.
That's the question.
What do you think?
Yeah, and I was going to say probably not to the Phillies or the Mets if I had to guess, unless the return was absurd. But yeah, I think that's the one area, other than someone like Marcell Ozuna, who's on an expiring contract. He's the other guy that could be available. But yeah, I think the bullpen is probably the natural place for the Braves to maybe trade a few guys. Raisel Iglesias has righted the ship recently. He had a very rough start to the season, but he's an expiring deal, proven late inning reliever, big dollar cost, but is a good pitcher with a long record. Pierce Johnson, kind of a secondary guy to that. They have a couple guys who are expiring contracts, and even beyond that, you got a couple. Aaron Bummer is wrapped up as well, a multi-year deal. But certainly, if I'm the Braves and I'm looking long term, relievers is where you could probably sell without too much pain, if that makes sense. Like you're kind of looking at the long term, and relievers are not going to be generally building blocks for your future. So that is where I would be. Well, guys, do you have any predictions quickly as to who's going to win the National League East? I'm sure you're both going to pick the teams you cover, but feel free.
Well, I might hold off though when I got to see what the Phillies do at the deadline, but they need like I said, they need somebody that comes in and can get big outs at the end of games, so they win the games they're supposed to win. They also need Bryce Harper, who's had kind of a down season. He's struggled with a wrist injury. He's made some real strides recently in terms of feeling better and producing more. They need him to be Bryce Harper. They need Schwarber, and they need Alec Boehm, and they need production from Trey Turner, who's had a very good season. So I think if the Phillies are going to win this division for a second straight year, they're going to win it with their big guys, the guys that are here having good second halves, and whoever they get as an addition is going to be a solid complement. So, but I do think that bullpen complement is important enough that I'm gonna hold off on predicting who wins it because it's such a tight race right now with the Mets. I will say this: I think it's going to be fascinating. I think that I know there's a mid-September series against the Mets, and it's going to be a great one. I think either team could win it. I really do.
I agree. I do think either team can win it, but I think that the Mets need more things to break right for them to win it. We need a little bit more luck on our side to win this, just because of the strength of that Phillies rotation and the basic guarantee, like you mentioned, Jim, that Dave Dombrowski will go out and plug the biggest hole you guys have. You will have a new shutdown, high leverage reliever by this time in August. There's no doubt about it. That's the kind of general manager he is. Where on the flip side, that's not exactly the type of general manager David Stearns is. And while this Mets team is getting up there in age, similar, sneakily, to the Phillies with Francisco Lindor over 30, P. Alonso on a 1-year contract, Brendan Nimmo over 30, most of this rotation over 30. I don't see them as having a similar type of urgency as what Dave Dombrowski has had his entire career and what they have with this Phillies roster. So I do think the Mets might take a bit more of a trepidatious approach with the trade deadline and really need the guys in-house to take their steps forward. Someone like Brett Beatty's ascension must continue. Ron Mauricio must get hot. Vientos has to wake up. Francisco Alvarez back from the minors. I think the Mets will need a huge contribution from at least two of those four players I just mentioned to make this race interesting, or just get red hot for a 4-game series in Philadelphia in September.
Yeah, big urgency here in Philadelphia, and there's no way Dombrowski. He's been around long enough that I know he feels it. I know he hears it. He's made moves at a couple deadlines here that they haven't really paid dividends. There's a lot of pressure on him to make a big score in that bullpen. And just because this rotation is so good and you just can't waste this season. You can't waste the work you're getting from this rotation because you have a shaky bullpen. You got to go out and fix it.
All right, guys, that was going to do it for our NL East Roundtable. Thank you for watching this NL East Roundtable. Look forward to watching how the second half unfolds, of course. Just subscribe to all three of our podcasts, Metsed Up, The Phillies Show, and Hammer Territory on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. Foul Territory will be right back after this.
A manager of a baseball team is like a jockey. And the trainer of the horse is kind of the GM. And you got to have such a close relationship. Those two guys have to be on the same page with everything. And you can't lament who we didn't get or who we didn't trade for or who we didn't sign. You can't because one, it's saying to everybody in that locker room, there were people better than you. Your focus is on those 26 guys and whoever may be coming up from the minor leagues. And it starts in spring training. It's all about making them as good as it can be. Is it fair when things don't work out and the manager or the coaches get fired? Of course not. But you didn't ever sign up for fairness. And that's why GMs stay around longer. But, it's kind of like who's critiquing their critiquers. And I tried to stay out of that. It was hard sometimes because you want to, what's the old expression, Bill Parcells? You want me to cook dinner, but you won't let me pick the groceries. Or help pick the groceries. And I think that's one of the reasons why Detroit has been so successful. You can tell what a close relationship AJ and their GM have and how much input their coaching staff has on player evaluations. And I think it's really played out as these young players have started to mature.
I've seen guys attempt to hit somebody and miss. And at some point, you got to stop trying. I mean, you just can't keep throwing at him like he's a dartboard. That's not the point. So I've seen that where it's failed, and then you got to move on at some point. You don't want to hurt anybody, even when you throw at and sometimes miss intentionally. At least the message has been sent. Of course, the guy on your team that had been hit really would prefer a pound of flesh. I understand that, but there's the nuance of doing something like this. The hit needs to be below the waist, I believe, And then sometimes it has to be done. The message has been sent, and I'll argue that with anybody. Today's world, especially let's just say the sports world in baseball, doesn't believe in this kind of stuff. Where you get to the point where there's an instant replay going on, things are being reviewed, and you have guys from two different teams standing on second base, arm in arm practically, looking at the scoreboard because all this stuff really, I think, subtracts emotion from the game. The technology, more technology involved, the less emotion involved. So that part of it I don't like. So you're seeing that more today. Nobody really wants to be that group. But I didn't see the Padre Dodger exchange, by the way. I'd have to check that out. But in today, I could see Schulte with the Padres. I get that. David with the Dodgers. And these are two of the better teams. You have to take your own turf, man. Nobody's going to give it to you.
Well, I like Witt, by the way. So if he wants to go on a date, I am all for it. And I think people misunderstood what I said because I think Jack is going to be a great player. And if I thought he was going to stink, then who cares when you bring him up because he's not going to make it. But if you have a player who's going to make it to arbitration, if you give that player Super 2 status, what that means is they have a fourth year of arbitration. What that means, instead of being paid the minimum, just call it $1 million, they're being paid $4 million. And that's $3 million spent on a player that you could spend on other players. And that's only year one. Then year two becomes your second year of arbitration instead of your first. That's another $4 million extra dollars. So by calling them up when they did, they're risking losing like $8 million. And if you're a team like Kansas City, frankly, if you're a team like Boston, anybody, you don't throw away that kind of money for an extra 2 weeks. It just does not make sense.
People forget how young Vlad is. He's 26 years old, and I think that his best years are ahead of him. It sounds kind of crazy, but I think his best years are probably a handful of years ahead of him when he has stuff really, really ironed out. He is the same guy. It is an easy answer. He understands that the expectations and the spotlight are going to be a little bit different. One of the many things I love about Vlad, though, is he just comes to the park every day, smile on his face, and he's ready to roll. So a little bit different, but yeah, token answer. He's basically the same dude.
Look, what they've decided to do in that organization, and I love Bill Schmidt, the GM. I think he's a great baseball man and a great scout. That's his best role, in my opinion. He's a good talent evaluator of amateur players. But this team is not keeping up with every other team in baseball. They don't play in the trade market significantly ever. They don't play in the big free agent market ever. They're all about homegrown, and they over-evaluate their own prospects. So instead of trading prospects when their value is high in the industry, they hold on to them until the prospects no longer carry their value. They're not run properly. They have a very shallow front office. They're well behind in a lot of areas like analytics and technology. And that's a problem. And look, I love Bud Black, and I would keep him in the organization, in some kind of role. But I think I'd probably go with a younger, more development-oriented, leadership group there, and change the way they do business completely because they're just far behind in the times.
Well, a couple of things I've noticed. I was out in AAA about a week ago. I'm in AA right now. I was in spring training. Certainly, the number of players just aren't there. You talked about they eliminated half of the draft, and that it does affect things as far as the depth of players, the number of players you have to pull from. And along the way, there will be a 29th round Eric Kratz that makes his way to the big leagues, and there's not all those players that are there right now. So that's the first thing that you notice. I think on how the game is played, the game's changing. I don't think you can push back against that, whether it's the rule changes or, what's the things that in development, things that are focused on. Obviously, velocity is shot through the roof on the pitching side. It's been interesting for me to see how some organizations value contact rates and just getting the ball in play. Back when I played, and certainly when you guys played, it really drove us crazy to strike out. And you've seen over the last 10, 15 years, the strikeout's just part of the game. And it's been fun for me to continue to learn, see what the Padres do. We put a big premium on getting the ball in play, and then how that can be stressed, throughout, different organizations. But the biggest thing is, certainly the number of players that are down, how the game is played. I think there's a lot of changes to the game that have been good for the game. When the pitch clock first came in play, I'm like, I don't know about this, or limiting the mound visits. It has helped the game, in my opinion. It really has. Now, the biggest change on the horizon here is ABS. We saw it in spring training. I'm watching it at the AAA level here last week. It is very interesting. I love the strategy of the game, and there's a ton of strategy tied to ABS and the challenges. I think that's going to ultimately, when it was brought up to me, I said, this is bad for the game. Now watching it play out and how quickly it happens, it's actually probably going to be a pretty interesting part of the game going forward. So the game keeps changing. We can't stop it. But I also think it comes full circle. And I think you're starting to see, some of the small ball come back into the play at the big league level, stressed at the minor league level. The bunting, the stealing the bases, moving runners, which kind of went away in our game for a long time when it was just about the 3-run homer and slug the ball. But again, it's the game. It keeps changing. I think you have to be smart enough to realize you have to move with it, and you try to stay out ahead of it. And as far as the strategy of it goes, so I love all those things. I really do. And but the ABS thing will be the next thing, Kratzy, that's really going to be interesting to see how that plays out.
No one knows, but in 1997, me and a guy named Armand Brown, I think it was the year before you got there in 98.
Yeah.
Armand Brown and I, we slept in the car. We knew we were going on the road that first series of opening series at home. We were going on the road after 6 days, and we couldn't find a place to stay, and we didn't have the money to stay. So we slept in the parking lot of the stadium, in New Britain Rocket Stadium. Step in that parking lot. When everybody went home, we pretend like we were leaving. We'd go right to the car and sleep in the car. And we couldn't wait to go on the road. But Rich was the clubhouse guy, and he actually allowed us to come in and wash our clothes, brush our teeth, take a shower, and then we would leave early in the morning, go to the mall and hang out there until it was time to report at 12:01. And then we went on the road, and they paid for our hotel. We got our first check. Then we were able to stay in the Hawthorne. We had enough money to stay in the Hawthorne Hotel in New Britain. So, and that's our story, man. I was afraid to tell anybody. I was embarrassed. I was like, man, I can go back to the hood and live better than this. And it was a rough time in 1997, man. It was the year I almost quit, and but ended up getting called up to the big leagues.
Here's what I think, the message out there that I try to bring. You see older players sometimes, and they get a little, oh, it was better when we played. We don't like this current game. I think that's a naive approach to hitting. I think as much experience as we have as ex-players who are in this game, I've been in this game my whole life, starting with my dad and then my career and watching my kids grow up. I've got a lot of experience, but I need to be able to relate to the current player, and I can still learn from them. So I think that's what we need to do instead of saying our way, we did it this way. No, tell me some thoughts you have, and maybe, and I've been impressed sometimes. I'll say, I wish I thought like that when I was playing. That's a good thing, but listen to the older generation as well. And if you can meet somewhere in the middle, I think that's where that's where you make the magic. And, it's just an ongoing thing, generation after generation after generation. We can all learn from one another.
Yeah, that's what he said.
That's what he said.
That's what he said.
That's what he said. Welcome back to FT, part of the FT network. So is our Cubs show, Northside Territory, which is hosted by Sahadev Sharma and Patrick Mooney. They're both excellent writers that cover the Cubs for The Athletic, and they just had a special episode released with Cubs President of Baseball Operations, Jed Hoyer. Let's get a little sneak peek of what that combo was like.
Jed, you've talked to us a lot about how you look at these moments, these deadline opportunities as moments to actually make a move. Sometimes teams just don't seem as motivated, and you kind of enjoy the fact that there's a deadline here. How rare and fleeting are these opportunities to improve your team and find motivated teams to work with?
Yeah, I was talking to another team president the other day, and he sort of said that, like, hey, listen, this is the one time I know you got 29 teams that are going to be looking to do deals. And, sometimes, other times of the year, you don't know you have everyone's attention, I guess is the best way to say it. Right. And I think this time of year, people get themselves into deal making mode. And, sometimes those are deals that are clearly like, either a rental or a buy now for this team. But like that was kind of what I did last year with Paredes, with Morel, was that it felt like a deal. We didn't have very high playoff odds last year at that time because of how we played early in the year. And we played great the last 3 months, but ultimately it wasn't enough. But, that was sort of a good example of a deal it was like, hey, this is an active time. I had started talking to Tampa actually right around this time of year, and we ended up doing that deal towards the end. And that was a good example. I don't think for either team that wasn't a typical deadline trade, right? Neither team had very high playoff odds, but it made sense for both sides to do it. So I do think that it's a time for activity. And I think that a lot of teams want to sort of, I don't want to say take advantage of that, but they want to be part of that action. And people get really creative this time of year. And I think that's a great thing.
Hey, Jed, to what extent does what could go wrong enter your thought process here? Like, you're a pretty optimistic guy, but you're a realist because you've been in the game for so long. Like, how does that enter the equation here of planning for potentially 3 months after this?
No question. I think that, I said it earlier. I think when you think about roster, you think about, you got to play, 2 months of baseball after the deadline, and you don't have August waiver trades anymore. So you do have to think about, what your roster looks like, what could go wrong. I think that's a big part of the job. Council and I talk about that all the time, that is a big part of the job, is trying to see around corners and trying to, it's not a great way to go through life thinking about what could go wrong, but at the same time, you have to think about these 2 injuries, what would we do in this situation? Because that is the nature of baseball. And it doesn't, the best case scenario doesn't often happen. So I do think that's a big part of my job. And I think it's a big part of Craig's job as well. Thinking through, if this goes wrong or that goes wrong, how do we handle it? Because that's the job.
Council, obviously a unique mind, has his favorite saying of these pitchers are just out-getters. It pushes us not to think of roles. How would you explain his role and outlook on acquisitions? And is he kind of does he play kind of a devil's advocate role sometimes in that room?
I think that's his personality in a good way. He's always pushing us on different things, but no, he's a significant voice. I mean, we're constantly talking to him about what we're doing. I think he takes a real interest in it. I'd say every other day when I walk in his office, he's like, yeah, here's my idea of the day. And he throws it at me, and they're good ideas. They're like, he thinks very much along the lines of a front office person a lot of times. And so, I think I've said this before, other managers I've had didn't really take a significant interest in the acquisition space, and he really does. And I really enjoy it because, he knows why we're doing things. He's pushing us to do certain things. And I think that way, when you trade for that player or you pick up that player, he's already invested. And that's happened a couple of times this year with guys like, the Paul Moran's transaction, for example. And, we got him and he threw him right into the fire, and I feel like that's easier to do when you're sort of in lockstep with the front office, why they're doing things, and you're able to, we got him and he put him to work right away. It didn't have any hesitation. And I think that's because he's part of the process.
If you want to hear that full Jed Hoyer conversation, you know where to go. Northside Territory, either on wherever you get your podcasts or, of course, their YouTube channel. We also have Crush City Territory, which covers the Houston Astros. And whether you love them or hate them, a huge name that was part of a lot of their success is Jeff Luhnow. He was their former GM and president, and Chandler Rome and Tyler Stafford caught up with him on Crush City.
That deadline, though, a couple things. So that was when you guys had just sort of ascended. You got AJ in his first year, guys taking steps forward, Correa's up. But that was the year you guys were always in a contentious battle with the Rangers for the division. And I wonder, how much did you guys think that team was for real? And that was really your first deadline as a buyer. How did that deadline differ from maybe the many that preceded it?
Well, I think the ones before that, we were just accumulating as much talent as we could, and we were moving salary off the books and trying to get younger and really kind of get, reset everything so we could make that jump. And 2015, I think with AJ arriving and the dynamic of the team, we felt like we could make the playoffs, and that was really the only goal, is to make the playoffs, and we accomplished it. So, there were other deals that we had considered in July, and I remember there were a couple others that I was more excited about that didn't end up happening. But we also had accumulated a pretty nice inventory of good young players that had interest. I mean, the first couple of years I was trading, players that were okay, but they were like second tier prospects or older veteran players like Brett Myers, who could serve a role, but weren't that sexy or exciting either. So I was getting what I could for those guys. But by 2015, we had some good drafts, we had some good inventory, had made some good trades in the years prior, and so felt like we could take some of that inventory and turn it into more security to get to the playoffs. And that's we accomplished that. I'm not going to say we accomplished it because we got those two players, because I think we would have made the playoffs without those two players. But and it came at a cost. I think Kazmir's the other one I think we got that year. We needed a starter, so it was all about figuring out how we could make the playoffs, and that was for us that was successful.
Since we're in that time frame, you talked about you were trading veterans for you were trading second tier prospects for assets, but one of your counterparts, Dayton Moore, went on a podcast with Eric Hosmer a couple months ago, and claimed that, and I believe it was in 2013. This is Dayton Moore saying you offered him Jose Altuve for Eric Hosmer.
Yeah,
I'm going to give you the floor on that one.
Okay, no, so he's not lying. Dayton is a very honest, high integrity guy. We did have a conversation about it. It didn't go very far. At the time, we weren't looking to trade Jose Altuve. We were looking to acquire Eric Hosmer at the time. And, Kansas City was on the rise. And we tried everything. We didn't have a lot of players that would bring you an Eric Hosmer. Right. So at the end of the day, we're like, well, is he going to trade him or not? Let's just throw our best guy out there, our best young guy, and see if he'll even react. It was not an official trade offer. It was one of those, hey, would you consider it? And it was a very short conversation, so it didn't go anywhere. But also, we all have to remember Jose Altuve at that time was not what Jose Altuve became. And obviously, we had a lot of confidence in him. We re-signed him to 2 extensions while I was there. He's been the franchise player ever since. But he was not a heralded prospect. He made it up. He was still kind of getting his. He was a high batting average, low OPS, but boy, he's done with his career is really spectacular.
Yeah, good call not trading him, I would say.
I guess that does just, from how we started this segment, I guess it goes to show like there really are no untouchables. Like you'll just see what happens. You said you were never going to trade Jose Altuve, but I guess there really is no such player that can never be off limits, I guess, in conversation.
Yeah, I think that's right. And you want to know how rational the other team is, how serious they are. And so, part of negotiation is seeing where you're at. Is there really a deal to be had here? And there wasn't for Hosmer, so we moved on.
Is there a trade kind of in those early days that I think people always want to know what could have been, what was on the finish line, what was some things we're making.
That was not those early days,
right?
That deal was done. It was done. Players were agreed to. The only thing left was ownership approval, and the ownership said no, even though they had kind of pre-cleared the deal. So that was huge, and that would have changed a lot of stuff for sure.
Bryce Harper would have looked pretty good, and I think we talked before the Astros played the Phillies in the 2022 World Series. Jeff, you and I talked about what that package would have looked like, what the players were agreed to.
Yeah,
it was. I don't want to say you would have fleeced them, but you would have fleeced them.
Yeah, it would have been in the Justin Verlander category of players that all had value that they appreciated, but didn't end up hurting the Astros had they gone. So that would have been nice, and that would have been. The day we thought we got him, I called AJ, and he's like, the Christmas in July. This is the most amazing thing I can even imagine. So.
I highly encourage you to check out the rest of that Luhnow conversation. You know where to go. Crush City Territory on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. And thanks to the entire FT Network fam for being part of this 2-hour extravaganza the day after the All-Star game. All of those shows under the FT umbrella, and you can check them out. Just search them wherever you're looking for shows. And you can find us again live on Thursday on Foul Territory, just like we do every single weekday, 2 hours, 1 to 3 Eastern. We'll be back. We'll see you then.